Yeah, hi, I'm Peter Kelly. Pam can't be here today, I'm sorry, but we've got 300 hectares here of coastal sand country. We're about 25 k's northwest of Dargaville, and we're about, the farm goes right to the coast, so we're pretty exposed to southwest winds. It'd be our biggest enemy, I think. Not only does it make it pretty cold, it also makes it pretty dry. We don't get a lot of rain in the summertime either, which makes tree planting a little bit difficult. It reduces the number of species we can grow. They've got to be wind tolerant, tough, and be able to survive dry summers. We've got 300 hectares here, and of that total, 40 hectares is planted in production forest, and probably another 4 or 5 hectares is in shelter belts and just amenity plantings around lakes and dams. Our first priority when we got here all those years ago was to just plant a bit of shelter, especially around the house and the sheds, because it was just 300 windy days out of a year, I suppose. And then we came from a small farm that had a few trees on it, so we just wanted to replicate that a little bit and make it feel a bit better. So we planted all the little valleys and trees, and we started slowly planting shelter belt trees along hedgerows, along north-south really, to keep the westerly wind off things. We planted a few native trees, and then we planted quite a few exotics because they just always grow better for some reason. And one of the battles has been the fact that a lot of the trees that we plant, a lot of trees that you do plant don't like saline winds. So we've experimented with things like flax as the first line of defence against the wind, and then banksias have been pretty good. Cabbage trees, pohutukawas, anything that grows as a weed on the coast usually grows pretty well up on the hills here. And then slowly over time, as it became a bit more sheltered, we could plant pine trees in blocks and more ornamental trees. This farm is an intensive beef farm with a techno-fence program, and we're trying to just use all the electric wires. We've got so much electricity around the farm that you can sort of put individual trees randomly over the farm, just to break it up a bit, make a bit more shelter and to make it a bit more pleasant. The things that guides where you plant too are the type of land you've got. This is a farm that's got some good flat land and some good rolling land and some pretty terrible, almost vertical land. The real steep stuff which doesn't run much stock, doesn't grow much grass, and it's a priority to plant just for good land care management really. Plant your forests on that sort of land, and out of the 300 hectares we've probably got 30 hectares that come into that class that it's just too steep to farm, and it might as well be in something that's producing, which is the pine trees, mostly pines in our case, and hopefully that'll get a good return too, and it looks darn nice. Yeah, we started planting trees about 35 years ago, and I have to say planting trees is a pretty easy thing to do. It doesn't cost very much money, and after all these years I look back and I think anyone who doesn't plant trees has got to be nuts really, because it just makes such a difference to the place you live on. One of the good reasons for planting is for succession. We had 2 sons, and we planted the trees so that when they got to the age when they might be ready to take over the farm, or we were ready to leave it, we'd have an income to leave the farm and move off. As it turned out, neither boy wanted to be a farmer. One of them turned out to be a forester because he was encouraged by the tree planting, I guess, and he's got a really good job in Sweden at the moment. But anywhere where we've planted trees was on such poor land, as most farms have got. The worst 10% of their land is usually not much good for livestock production, so it might as well be in trees, and it's a good income after the 25-30 years when they're ready to harvest. When we first thought about planting trees, we must have talked to a few people. Talked to Forestry, Forest Service at the time, I think it may have been, and they recommended that we talk to the Farm Forestry Association. We did that and were pretty inspired by what they had to say and what we saw. We quickly joined the Farm Forestry Association, and we've gained an enormous amount of information out of that over the years, and it's just pretty darn good to talk to farmers that have got the same interest, and that's been a real great social thing for us too over the years. Yeah, one of the most difficult things in planting trees, especially odd clumps of trees on livestock farms, is protecting them from the cattle, from the stock. And here we've got an intensive beef system, a Techno fence system arrangement, and we have a lot of electric fenced lanes, and we're taking the opportunity of having all the extra electric wires here. Plant a tree and run a hot wire around it, and it's sort of so easy to stick a tree in and protect it from the stock. As the years go by, we just plant a few more and a few more until we'll have this sort of really well wooded and really well sheltered, and it's also so easy. What we're looking at here is shelter belting, and one of the most successful trees we've had to deal with because of the really salty winds have been pohutukawas. And we've planted them north and south so they keep the westerly wind off. And east-west we've planted deciduous trees, the poplars and willows. The idea being that in the summer they're nice and shading. And the pohutukawas just really look really beautiful here at Christmas time for about a month, I suppose, and all the pohutukawas come out in red flowers. The only problem we've had with them is possums love to eat them, but they are pretty tolerant to droughts. In the early days we planted flaxes just to keep the wind off, and interspersed with radiata. The radiata looks a bit ugly, but it does the job. But we're replacing them slowly. We're just dropping them out and putting banksias and pohutukawas in their place. The other thing about poplars and willows, of course, is if you have a real bad summer, which we often do, is that you've got an enormous amount of stock fodder here, and it's not hard to just let the one hot wire down, drop 3 or 4 trees a day, and that's just about enough food for 70 or 80 cattle to be eating. One of the things you worry about a bit is stock getting into the swamps, and the first thing they do is get stuck in there, so you lose cattle. And the other thing is they spoil the water quality pretty badly, and we pump our water from further down at the bottom end of these streams. So we've fenced the streams off in most places and planted anything that'll grow in there, which is a lot of poplars, a few native trees, and eucalypts, anything we can get to grow in there. A lot of cabbage trees, and they do really well in those water courses, as do flaxes, of course. Yeah, for a young guy starting on this land, I think a fairly early priority for him would be to fairly early identify his poorer classes of land, especially in the sand country, most country I guess. Anything that's sort of getting fairly steep that you can't drive a motorbike or a tractor on, it's almost a waste of time for livestock production, because you can't get a fertiliser truck on it, you can't get your bike on it, and generally it's pretty unproductive. So fairly early on, put a hot wire, identify those areas, put a hot wire around them, and just sticking them in trees. If you want to get a financial reward, you would probably plant radiata and eucalypts, and if you just want it to be pretty, well, you can plant anything you like planting really. But and you'd also be looking, I think, at existing fence lines and establishing shelter belts. The country we're in now, in the early days, this used to be really windswept, and I've got no doubt that our production is way better now that we've got shelter all around it. It's pretty highly, it'd be dairy country now really, from what it was. The trees that have done the best for us as an investment, a financial investment, would be radiata. You can make good money out of poor land in 25 years. So obviously the best advice is to plant them as soon as you can, because you run out of blocks of 25 years pretty quickly. The best shelter trees for us have been pohutukawa and banksia. In the really, really hard environment, I would say flaxes, where just about nothing else will grow. And in fact, you can almost make a fence out of a flax, a sheep-proof flax, if you put 2 one-wire fences 2 metres apart and plant flaxes between them. That just about becomes a solid enough barrier to keep sheep out, and the cattle don't eat them. Eucalypts in good sheltered valleys are fine, but we've found that it's pretty much exposed, and the wind just snaps them off. After 35 years, you almost forget how much it's improved. If you look at old photos and you see the landscape with no trees at all, it's unrecognisable. But I think it's had major financial benefits for us, just in so much stock shelter. Not only do the stock do better, but the grass performs so much better when you can just keep the wind off it, just keep the shelter up. You don't have to have big blocks anywhere where there's an acre or two. The bigger the better, I suppose. That's a bit rough for stock. You can just put a wire around that, plant that, and pine trees is probably and radiata is probably the best financial return. Do the silviculture, which is don't plant too much at once so you can keep up with it. And yeah, I think early days identify your tree sites, and you don't all have to do it all in one hit, just plod on a little bit every year.